So in this part, we're going to look at Israel. So this is something which is very exciting for us because we always look to Israel. Everything centres in God's plan and purpose around the nation of Israel. And so we're going to look at Israel and the new alliances which are forming between Israel and the countries to the east of her, the southern Arab states. Something which we've been looking for a long, long time, and now witness with our own eyes. So it is indeed exciting times. So we opened with the reading of Isaiah chapter 2, and those first 6 verses, first 5 verses, we use when we're giving a Bible talk lecture to give a wonderful picture of the coming kingdom, the great change that will take place. And then suddenly Isaiah, the whole mood changes, doesn't it, in that chapter? And so we then read from verses 6 onwards of an Israel very displeasing to God. Now, it is quite a normal biblical formula to have an opening picture of the end of the matter and then tell us how we got to that end picture through the rest of the chapter. And that's exactly what is happening here. The end chapter is that Israel will be God's people, will be holy, will be faithful. Nations will come up to Jerusalem. But that hasn't always been the case. And I believe that in the verses from 6 to 9, we have a picture, a very accurate picture of Israel of today, trusting in themselves. And then from that picture, the rest of the chapter explains the problems that are going to come upon Israel till they are forced to recognize that the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men, and they must look to him and not to their own strength. So I just want us to begin with to tease out some of the things that we read in verses 6 to 9. We read that the first thing was that they were replenished, refilled from the east. And this is one of the phenomena of Israel today, is that she is growing friendship with Saudi Arabia to the east, but especially to India. Very close ties between those two countries. Quite different countries, but Israel has the technology which the Indians need to feed their multitude, because Israel has developed drip irrigation using low quantities of water to maximize growth, and has specialized in making very productive varieties of crops. So there is an association between those two countries which is growing. And Israel is making many links with India. But not only India, to China. The Chinese come in great numbers to Israel. They see Israel as a place where they can invest their money, and the trade relationships are growing exceedingly between this huge country of China and this little tiny country of Israel. Absolutely amazing. And further over still to the east is Japan. And again, Israel is making many overtures to Japan for trade and treaties between the two countries. So we can see that this is a very accurate picture of Israel of the past few years. A great trading nation is Israel, and working her way eastward, making associations with many countries to the east. And then the second part of that verse 6 says that they are soothsayers like the Philistines. Now, the only account we have of the Philistines using soothsaying was when they had captured the ark, and they had had terrible time with the ark going around the different cities of the Philistines. They decided they'd better send this ark back. And they had a consultation as to what they should do. They used divination to work out what they should do. And the only thing I can draw from this is that that's exactly, if you look at the word divination in Strong's, it is to act covertly. And the Israelis are world leaders in espionage is not the right word, intelligence, military intelligence, finding out what the other nations are planning to do. And I think that perhaps this is a little indication of Israel's skills. And Mossad is world-renowned for its abilities. In fact, Netanyahu went to Europe to plead with them to not to accept Jerusalem as the capital. And what Netanyahu said to Macron was, well, look, we have helped you many times. We cooperate on many areas, including security. As you well know, that cooperation has saved many lives. Israel has provided valuable intelligence to many countries in Europe and many countries outside Europe that has prevented dozens of horrible terrorist attacks, some of which, unfortunately, you have suffered. And there was an interesting article the day before yesterday, and it was saying how that Mossad looks after world intelligence, Shin Bet looks after internal affairs in Israel, and they were saying that in the year 2017 they had foiled 400 major attacks and 1,100 lone wolf attacks. Now, most intelligence services, I mean, in Britain, they would say, well, there's nothing we can do about lone wolf attacks. They're just outside our ability to be able to pick up and detect. But the Israelis are past masters. They infiltrate into the Arab quarters and keep a close watch on what is happening. And they managed to stop 1,500 terrorist attacks. So there is an interesting phraseology, soothsayers like the Philistines. They please themselves and the children of men, the Authorised Version, the Web puts it. They clasp hands with the children of strangers. Not so long ago, Jews really only did dealings with fellow Jews. They will find out fellow Jews in different parts of the world and do business with them. No longer. In Israel, it doesn't matter who you are. They're quite happy to shake hands on deals with anybody around the world. And the whole world is their oyster. And little tiny Israel has done very well. It says here in verse 7, their land is full of silver and gold, and it now has come from 25, 30 years ago. Israel was a very poor country because the labour unions were in very strong control. And it was when Netanyahu, the present Prime Minister, was the economics minister, having been educated in America, he realised that had to break the power of the unions, and that's what he did. And from then on, Israel has prospered. And looking at gross domestic product, which is the measure that people use to indicate the strength of a nation, little tiny Israel is number 32, just a little bit behind Norway, Austria and Iran, but ahead of Hong Kong, South Africa, Denmark and Ireland. Absolutely amazing. The wealth of Israel is generating through its own brain power, its own skills. So it is indeed a land full of silver and gold. And what is very interesting is that silver and gold are used in electronics, gold especially, gold-plated things. And in the field of electronics, you know, all your phones will have an original source in Israel. Israel design, Israel technology, or even the chips being made in Israel. But that's just a bit of a buy. A land full of horses and chariots. Well, we have to put that in modern 21st century language. And Israel is swarming with military devices, many of which they have built themselves, designed themselves, or adapted American planes and fitted it with their own equipment. And so this is such an accurate description of Israel today, full of horses and chariots of different sorts. And the problem is that Israel trusts in these defences that they have very cleverly built and designed. And so the prophet Isaiah says to his people, your land is full, full of idols. What is an idol? That which you substitute for God, that which you bow down to, that which you put your trust in. And Israel of today have put their trust in these things which their own hands have made. And one has to admire the technology that, an enemy can fire a missile and the Israeli Iron Dome can decide work out where it's going to land. If it's going to land in an open place, they don't do anything. If it's going to hit Israeli homes or that, then they fire a missile and destroy it in the middle of the air. Science fiction when I was a child, but a reality of today. Absolutely amazing. But Israel trusts in those things more than they trust in God. And you would think that if you lived in a country which has, to the north of you, over 100,000 missiles aimed at you, you wouldn't sleep at night. And yet Israel, when they do a survey of the happiness of different countries, it ranks number 12 out of 156 of people feeling happy and secure because they have these defences and they know that their army is seemingly invincible. And every strata in Israel bows down to these weapons. They feel safe by them. So there is, I think, a very accurate description of Israel of today, trusting in her own wealth, making alliances with all sorts of people, and building up their wealth from that kind of thing. But we know that this is how it must be, because the picture is of Israel being very strong and being very rich and very prosperous in order to be a desirable prey and a spoil for the northern host to come down against her. And so we see how God works. He allows his people to trust in themselves so that when that all fails, when the Gogian forces come against Israel and Israel is defeated, and the Iron Dome and all the David's sling and all these things fail, they're overwhelmed, then where can they turn to? They can turn to their God, and that's what we know they will be brought to do. And they will trust and pray and for their God for salvation and look to him to save them. And the Lord Jesus and the saints will already be prepared and they will come forth and save them. So we know there's a terrible time ahead for Israel. Another Holocaust awaits them. Yet what emerges is a people who are faithful and righteous, never more go astray, never more lose their trust in their God. So Ezekiel 38 and verse 12 is a verse we know very well. The reason why Gog is described as coming with a whole host of different other nations against Israel is to take a spoil and to take a prey, to turn thine hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited and upon a people that are gathered out of the nations which have gotten cattle and goods and dwell in the midst of the land. So spoil is used of taking the goods of a country, and the prey is taking the people of the country. And Gog, Russia, not only wants what Israel has got, which is energy supplies, electronics which can overcome the Russian S-400s, the Israeli planes can go into Syria and do what they want and come back because the Israelis have worked out how to counter the technology that Russia has. And Israel and Russia very much would like to lay holds on that technology. So one can see that what is building up in Israel is a prey, a spoil, something to be seized. But they also want the people, the brains behind the design of all these things. And exactly the same kind of thing happened at the end of World War II. there was quite a contest between the United States and Russia to seize the German scientists who had developed the flying missiles, and the early space race was started in Germany, and a lot of those were Jewish scientists. And there was a big race who could collar and take away to either Russia or America the scientists at the end of World War II. And one can picture a similar situation. So I just want to go through some slides to see what a desirable spoil and a prey Israel is. Suddenly, Israel does have friends. President Trump. What a transformation from Obama, who did everything he could to knock down the Jews. He hated Netanyahu. But Trump has a real interest in Israel, and has got Jewish connection in his family, and has proved to be a good friend to Israel. And in Britain, David Cameron was very friendly to Israel. He set in motion the making of Israel a key market for British business people to trade with Israel and Israeli companies to come to Britain. And Mrs. May, too, as a daughter of a vicar, she is very pro-Israel, has been a friend of the Conservative Friends of Israel for a long, long time. And she has many Commonwealth friends in India and Canada and Australia. There is this long, long linkage back to Israel. And at this time, the Canadians are very well thought of, and the Australians and New Zealand, Indians. The old Commonwealth countries are very friendly to Israel. And now she has many southern Arab friends, and we'll look at a few slides there. What a transformation. It's something we knew had to happen from Ezekiel chapter 38 and a few verses on, verse 13, and we'll come to that in a moment. But, you know, it has now become a reality, and the past few months it really has shown itself in a new light. And the US ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, very pro-Israel, prepared to stand up and speak her mind against the UN. And Israel's economy is booming, and that gives you friends because people want to trade with you. 4% growth in 2016. Money is now coming in from the Tamar oil fields, and that's making a big difference to their revenues. And work's beginning on the huge Leviathan field. They're sinking in lots of money and expect to get the money back within 3 or 4 years. And hope to have gas flowing by the end of the year after next, 2019. And that will double the amount of gas that Israel has. At the moment, from Tamar, she has sufficient gas for herself and is able to export to Jordan. But when Leviathan comes along, she has actually a problem. What are we going to do with all this gas which is coming up out of the earth? An interesting problem. But President Trump visited Israel back in May. Seems a long time ago, doesn't it? But a very cordial meeting, and it was exciting for the Israelis to have an American president who was prepared to sit down and visit the Wailing Wall, the Western Wall, and at the end of his journey he pledged that he would help to bring about some solution to the problems between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And he, all during his presidency, his election race, promised that he would move the embassy to Jerusalem. And we shall see how this is becoming a reality. Now, this was quite an amazing article. This was the beginning of the year. Israel, the 8th great power in 2017. This is from American Interest. The US remains the most powerful country on earth, followed by China, Japan, Russia, Germany, India, Iran, and Israel. A new name on our list of the 8 greats. A small country, Israel is a rising power with a growing impact on world affairs. Overall, the Jewish state continues to develop diplomatic, economic, and military power and to insert itself into the heart of regional politics. Large offshore discoveries of natural gas and oil are turning Israel into an energy exporter. Energy self-sufficiency is a boost to Israel's economy. Energy exports boosts Israel's foreign policy clout. Access to Israeli technology, like the technology behind the Iron Dome missile defense system, matters to more and more countries. Israel's diplomatic outreach to Africa and its deepening relationship with India benefit from Israel's ability to deliver what people in other countries want. Another factor is the change in the Middle Eastern balance of power that has transformed Israel from a pariah state to a kingmaker. Syria, one of Israel's most vociferous enemies and biggest security threats, has now been broken. Egypt hates Hamas, ISIS, and the Islamic Jihad as much as Israel does. Never has Egyptian-Israeli security cooperation been as close as it is today. Even more consequential, the rise of Iran and its aspirations to regional hegemony make Israel critical to the survival of the Sunni Arabs, including the Gulf states. Israel begins 2017 as the keystone of a regional anti-Iranian alliance, a most favoured nation in the White House, and a country that enjoys good relations with all the world's major powers, bar Iran. What a transformation. And that is the situation that Israel finds itself in. Absolutely remarkable. Israeli exports set to top $100 billion. This is American dollars for the first time. Up 6% in dollar terms over the parallel period last year and on course to top $100 billion by the end of the year. Figure will be first time landmark for Israel. Absolutely staggering. And so they now have energy, and how they're going to make use of this energy and export it. Well, one means is to take gas and turn it into electricity. It's not easy to export gas, you need huge pipelines. But by turning gas into electricity and then laying an undersea cable, then you can export it. And with the backing of the EU are helping to plan, and they haven't started to build it yet, but it is anticipated that this is due to start next year, a long, long cable stretching from Israel, from the power stations of Israel, up to Cyprus and across to Crete, and then there is an existing cable that connects Crete to the mainland of Greece. And this will end the electrical isolation of Cyprus, because Cyprus is in the EU. That's why the EU is interested in this, because it will bring Cyprus and connect it to the EU. We know that's going to be in vain because we know what leg Cyprus is going to be in, but the EU doesn't know that. And if she's prepared to help with the money, well, that's good for Israel. So this is what is being planned, this cable, so that Israel can export energy, it can be shared among the islands and onto mainland Europe. There are 3 major gas fields, all very close together. Egypt has discovered gas there. Cyprus has discovered gas there, the Aphrodite field, and the Leviathan field is there. And what is making sense is that for Egypt and Israel and Cyprus to work together, and if a pipeline has to be built, to cooperate on that construction. Now, initially, the thought was to take that gas, build a pipeline up into Turkey. Turkey has always been very gas hungry, and that's quite a short distance. But events have come along which make that almost impossible. At one time, Israeli-Turkish relations were very, very good. And then when the incident of the Israelis storming that ship that was sent by the Turks against to break the Gaza blockade, that's turned things very sour between Israel and Turkey. And also the problem is Cyprus. Cyprus is divided. The top half is under Turkish control, the bottom half is under Greek control, and never the two shall meet. They've had many talks about cooperating together, and the southern part is in the EU and the northern part isn't. But again, things have soured between Turkey and Greece. Under Erdogan, relations are pretty poor. So what is being looked at now is a much longer pipeline following a very similar route to the electrical cable, and again linking Israel and Egypt to Cyprus, and then on to Crete and on to Greece, so that gas can be exported across into Europe that way. So these things are in active discussion. The three countries are having meetings: Cyprus, Egypt and Israel and Europe, Greece, and so we shall see what happens with that. Many of these things, it takes quite a long time to actually get off the ground because immense cost in building it will be one of the longest gas pipelines, and the Mediterranean is pretty deep along that stretch. So foreign investment was up 7% when we got to September. Exports set to top 100 billion, yes. Aliyah still continuing, Jews from Europe especially, Ukraine, Russia, going back 27,000 increase in population through Aliyah last year, or this year, sorry. No, that is 2016 figures. We just got to wait another couple of days when all the 2017 figures will be released, but we can't wait that long. So tourism has been way up, 22% year on year. That was in October. The happiness index, we already mentioned that. And what her aim is to be number 15 in the world. She's number 32 at the moment, to be number 15 in the world's economy by 2025, because she'll have all this extra energy from Leviathan, which will make a huge difference to the economy of the country. And so we've seen this surge of Jews going back to their land. 43% of the world's Jewish population now lives in Israel. We never thought it would get to that kind of figure, but 43% of the Jewish population of the world is now living in the land of Israel. And, you know, the figure just goes up and up and up and up. So 6.5 million Jews, 8.7 Israelis. Now, in the section in Ezekiel 38 where it talks about the spoil and the prey, in the verse before, it talks about them dwelling safely without walls or bars or gates. And this has been a problem verse. We can see what it means, but how on earth can Israel dwell peaceably surrounded by enemies? It seemed a conundrum. And I believe that God inserted that verse as an act of faith for Bible believers. Because how could it possibly come about that Israel could dwell safely, confidently among all her enemies? And yet, brothers and sisters, we're seeing great changes in the Middle East that will herald this time of peace that the prophet has said. It will come to pass. God's word is always true. He knows, right from the beginning, what the end picture is going to be. I just want to add to that, just before we deal with it, another passage from Isaiah. I just turned to Isaiah chapter 10, because again, it helps us considerably in understanding the present situation. At the moment, Russia is very friendly to Israel. That's the most unusual thing. Usually, Russia is very anti-Semitic. And it all goes back to Mr. Putin, President Putin. When he was a child, his very poor family he was brought up in, both parents went out to work. And when he came home from school, both parents were out at work. And his neighbours took him in and looked after him. Now, the angels saw to it that those neighbours were Jews. And at a time of communism, when to be openly Jewish was something very brave, this Jewish family that lived next door were openly Jewish. And Putin has never forgotten the kindness that they showed. He has many Jewish friends. Many of the powerful oligarchs in Russia are Jewish. But when he went to Israel for the first time, he looked up his German teacher, who at secondary school had taught him German, which of course played a big role in his life. Not that he knew it at the time, and nor did she, because this young pupil that she was teaching German to would eventually join the KGB. And because he was very good at German, he was sent to East Germany to be a spy in East Germany. And he looked her up and found that she'd emigrated to Israel when she retired. And she was living in straitened circumstances, and so he bought her a flat in Tel Aviv. And I think, was it about a fortnight ago, she died. So here is something remarkable, that there is this friendship between Putin and the Jews. He gets on very well with Netanyahu. They have many conversations. Now, Isaiah told us about that 2,500 years ago. Well, God, through Isaiah. So in verse 20 of Isaiah chapter 10, it shall come to pass in that day that the remnant of Israel, and such as are escaped of the house of Jacob, so this is post-Armageddon, the remnant that has been left, shall no more stay, lean, support oneself upon him that smote them, defeated them, but shall stay on Yahweh, the Holy One of Israel, in truth. The remnant shall return, even the remnant of Jacob, unto the mighty God. Now, who is going to smite them? Well, Ezekiel 38 tells us, doesn't he? We know it is Russia that's going to come down. So what Isaiah is saying, that just before you are smashed as a nation, you will be trusting in the one who actually turns round and thinks an evil thought, Ezekiel 38, and comes to destroy you. I think that's a remarkable verse. But that is what is happening today. And this is going to be part and parcel of how a period of peace is going to be established. Because Russia has moved herself into Syria and is wanting to work with Israel. And Saudi and the southern Arab nations are wanting to work with Israel. And between them, they will bring about some very temporary period of peace and stability, where Israel will dwell supremely confidently. So let's see this friendship, first of all, between Trump and Netanyahu, because this has a little key bearing. Trump reacted positively to Netanyahu's proposal to broaden the Israeli-Palestinian peace process to a regional effort as a very important new idea on a broader canvas, which he believed could succeed. See, up to now, everybody's concentrated Israel and the Palestinians, Israel and the Palestinians. And Netanyahu explains to Trump, look, we can't deal with the Palestinians because they don't want peace. All they want is to get rid of us. So you can't negotiate with somebody who just wants to get rid of you. But why not look at the broader picture, There are other nations, the Arab nations, who want to do peace with us. Now, if we could establish peace with these nations, then they will put pressure on the Palestinians. So that's what Netanyahu put to Trump back in February. To, first of all, not concentrate on the Palestinian Israelis, but, how does it go on? To seek an Israeli peace accord with Saudi Arabia and the Gulf Emirates as the lead-in to negotiations for an accord with the Palestinians. Egypt, Jordan and Turkey, with whom Israel already has normal relations, would jump in later. This deal fits in with the US plan, reported more than once on these pages, for a regional peace between the Sunni Arab nations and the Jewish state. Some of the spade work may have been performed by the CIA director, who paid a secret visit to Ramallah to the Palestinians for talks with Abbas after trips to Ankara, Riyadh, following which Turkey upgraded its diplomatic mission in Israel. So Trump has been working behind the scenes, despise him if you will, but he has been working behind the scenes to bring about a reconciliation between Israel and the Gulf states, to try and bring about a period of peace. Now, part of that deal is to recognise Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Everybody knows it is the capital, that's where the government is, but everybody's afraid of upsetting the Arabs. Now, Trump, being a businessman, recognises what needs to be done and gets on and does it. And we know at the beginning of this month he signed this declaration that the embassy would be moved to Jerusalem, that they do recognise that Israel's capital is Jerusalem. And how the world erupted on that news. Now, interestingly, Russia, back in April, said exactly the same thing, that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. And not a nation made a murmur. Trump do it, and the whole world erupts. The Pope erupts, everybody erupts. What was so fascinating, and Brother Stephen told us about his spine-tingling moments when he saw the courtyard of King Nebuchadnezzar where Daniel would have trodden, while my spine-tingling moments came when they published a map in the Jerusalem Post of the nations that had and hadn't attended an Islamic summit. As soon as Trump made this declaration, Turkey called together an extraordinary meeting of the Islamic Organisation of Islamic Cooperation. It's a Muslim organisation founded in 1969. This was the 6th extraordinary meeting. They meet regularly, but now and again events happen, and it's usually over Israel, they have an extraordinary meeting. So since 1969, this is only the 6th extraordinary meeting. So Erdogan calls all the Arab leaders together to condemn what was happening. But certain members didn't go. And this was the map that was published in the Jerusalem Post. Those in blue didn't go, all the rest in green attended. Now, I've had maps like that for years, where I've said, we're looking for a regional alliance of nations working with Israel. And here we have it in the Jerusalem Post. Absolutely thrilling. And one of the big changes is the new Saudi Crown Prince. And he sent a message to Israel saying, look, this declaration by Trump, don't worry about it, we can handle it. It's not it's no issue and no bar to our engagement with Israel. Official White House sources disclosed Tuesday that the Crown Prince Salman informed President Trump that while Riyadh publicly objects to Jerusalem's recognition as Israeli capital, he has to because of the people, It isn't a bar to Saudi engagement with Israel, nor should it be detrimental to Trump's administration steps in the Middle East. So he's working with Trump to bring about peace. So here's the headline, 6th of November, New Allies, Israel and Saudi Arabia in the Jerusalem Post. Times are changing in the Middle East as alien nations find common ground in a bid to avert Iranian supremacy within the region. Thrown into the mix is a strong international desire for ousting Assad. The opening of the dialogue between Israel and Saudi is perhaps the most significant shift in the region. There'll be no diplomatic ties between the two nations, as Saudis reported the Palestinians. A more open relationship has not come overnight, however. The two nations have shared intelligence on enemies within the region for a long time. And so it goes on. And the Crown Prince himself actually made a secret meeting to Israel. So it suggests stronger ties are increasing. The great divide in the Middle East may be on the horizon, as Israel and the US may well become a significant force between the split. The anti-Iranian sentiment is building, while the divide will become even greater. The moves by Saudis and Israel are likely to bring greater strength to the Arab world, supported and armed by the US in an effort to fight off Iranian supremacy. A united Sunni Arab front with Israel as an ally may begin to stabilise a region that looks to be on the verge of collapse. And that's another one, but time is moving on. But absolutely amazing, and this was just yesterday. Many of the southern Arab nations are very displeased with what Abbas is doing, making all this fuss about Jerusalem. And the headline was in the Israel Hayom paper, displeased with Palestinians, Arab states chart new Jerusalem policy. And Jordan and Egypt and Saudi are telling the Palestinians, calm it down, calm it down. That's not what we want. Now, time is nearly gone and we've still got a bit of ground to cover, so let's just whistle through these. The Saudi Crown Prince is wanting to build a huge new city on the northern border, very close to one of the old Dedans, and this will be a city which covers vast territory, which will enable a whole new economy for Saudi Arabia. They want to get away from dependence on oil, and is proposing to put it up there because it's close to Egypt and close to Jordan. He wants to work with both of those. But more vitally, it's close to Israel, and he wants Israeli help with all of this. Not only Saudi Arabia, but Bahrain, warming ties, but I skip over that. Israel is a major trade route for Turkey and Jordan. I'm going to skip over that. India and Israel are a strategic alliance. We're going to skip over that because I need to deal with Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish. So sorry, I shouldn't have gone quite so far, should I, from that? So there are three passages, there are two sets of Sheba and Dedan and another Sheba. One Sheba and Dedan is descended from Abraham through Jokshan. There is a Sheba on the far side of the top there, again descended from Shem, and then from Cush there is a Sheba and Dedan. So, very rapidly, Ham's grandson had Sheba and Dedan, and these we associate with the Persian Gulf, and especially Bahrain, the Sheba, and the Dedan is Bahrain. So yes, I'll split the colours there. Shem's great-great-grandson Joktan had a Sheba, and again we associate down with the south, the Queen of Sheba, and then Abraham's grandson Sheba and Dedan, Sheba on the Persian Gulf, Dedan northern Saudi Arabia, and we'll put these on a map. But what is more important is the generations on from Noah, and the reason for that is that as they populated the earth, the ones closer to the flood, they obviously had first pick of places. When by the time you come to the Sheba and Dedan of Abraham, 12 generations on, the land's pretty well occupied and you have to take over other people's territory. And that's what we find. So, Dedan, the Hamitic Dedan, Sheba and Dedan. Dedan, the place where they resided, is believed to be identical with what is now Bahrain. So we can place Dedan on the island of Bahrain, and interestingly, Britain and America have bases there. And Sheba seems to move down into the south there. So that's Ham's sons moved down there. And Dedan also probably moved further south as well, all down that coast there. They were, Ezekiel tells us, merchants who dealt with India, brought stuff from India and took it across to the fairs of Tyre. Now the second one, Joktan's Sheba, he was one of 13 brothers. Sheba was one of 13 brothers. And he again seems to have gone down to the same area where the Hamitic Sheba was and took over. The 13 sons of Joktan, of Joktan, he gave his name, Joktan, the town of Joktan is named after him. All his sons seem to occupy this region here, and they regard themselves as the true Arabs, and those other nations on that region who aren't descended from them, they call the pretend Arabs, the mustard Arabs. So Sheba had brothers, Havilah and Ophir, which were down in that region, so that helps us to say that's where Sheba went down to the south there. Then Abraham's grandson, Dedan, is associated with Al-Ullah. That was the original Dedan. In fact, pottery has been found there, which says that this Rahmilil, the son of Bushcrack, camped in Dedan. So he must have had nothing to do that night and scraped on this bit of clay that he'd stopped at Dedan. And so that helps us to identify that Dedan is Al-Ullah. And also in Ezekiel 25, it talks about Dedan being near to Teman. So Teman is just to the north there. So, and so we'll skip that. So it gives us that region. When we talk about Sheba, and when Ezekiel talks about Sheba and Dedan, then it's talking about those nations there, what we will call the Gulf states. And of course, what is the odd thing is down in the south in Yemen is the battleground between Saudis and Iran. And just in the last few days or few weeks, the leader said, I'm going to go over to the Saudi side, and got himself assassinated. But the chap that has taken over also seems to be wanting to turn his back on Iran. And I believe that we shall see a movement of Yemen back into the Saudi camp, because this is where the Shebas were, and they're going to be on the side of Israel, so they're going to be out of the Iranian camp. So this is an active spot where a lot of things are happening. So we'll pull the plug there. There were one or two more slides, but I thought today we haven't got so many slides. I can, ad lib and add a lot more. Fatal. But thank you very much.